Louis Bedford, and I'm a board member of Progress Texas. Progress Texas is one of the most important organizations in the state. The fact of the matter is Progress Texas actively pushes and forces the state forward on a lot of issues that, in all honesty, we need to be pushed forward on, whether it's marijuana, whether it's human rights, whether it's immigration, whether it's reproductive justice access and abortion specifically. There needs to be an entity that actively advocates for those people and for those communities and for those issues, and that's Progress Texas, and that's why I'm involved. 200 years ago, Frederick Douglass once said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will." So we have to demand for our voices to be heard, and we have to demand justice for each and every one of us, because if not now, when? If not you, who?
It's Monday, March 3rd, 2025, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Let's review the scene this morning on Governor Abbott's school voucher program and how that relates to rural and very red parts of Texas. For years, plans to funnel public school dollars into private schools in a system that in other states, as expected, has more or less turned into a subsidy for wealthy families, while also becoming a massive budget buster for those states, have been resisted by Republican Texas lawmakers from the country who understood that their small-town schools back home would not come out ahead on this deal. Many of those communities with few, if any, private school options at all. Governor Abbott spent most of the lead up to last year's election undermining those lawmakers back home, sponsoring more voucher-friendly primary challengers who generally didn't actually campaign on the voucher issue, rather sticking to the more standard recent GOP play of xenophobic talk on immigration and even more hateful talk about trans people. And Abbott's picks won a bunch of those races, making the possibility of vouchers passing in the current legislative session quite strong. Well, over the last couple of days, we've seen evidence of the reason that those otherwise loyal Abbott-backing lawmakers differed on vouchers, because their otherwise loyal Republican voters in those small towns back home hate them. To Palestine, Texas, population less than 20,000, where a recent town hall held by two of those voucher-pushing Republican state reps, Cody Harris and Brad Buckley, became the scene of a wave of boos from voucher opponents, leading those two lawmakers to flee the stage. April Perdon at KLTV in Tyler says Harris organized that event and named it A Time for Truth and Facts. Turns out an appropriate theme, as the truth and facts, as a great many of his constituents see them, do not support bleeding small-town public schools dry to offer a discount to wealthy families on their private school bills. Hundreds of miles to the west in Plainview, Texas, just north of Lubbock, population also about 20,000, the local school district is formally making a stand against the voucher scam. Reese Nations at the Plainview Herald writes that Plainview Superintendent H.T. Sanchez and that district's board have unanimously approved opposition to vouchers as one of the legislative priorities they'll present to the Texas Association of School Boards. Superintendent Sanchez says, quote, as Senate Bill 2 purported, $10,000 would go to parents who want to send their kids to a private school, so public school dollars would go to private school parents. The standard also is you have to be a family of four making less than $160,000 to qualify, which is wild, because it's supposed to be a program to target at-risk students, unquote. Nations notes that the nonprofit Every Texan, which works on public policy research and analysis in matters related to Texas, has calculated that little old Plainview ISD, if just 1% of its kids accepted a private school voucher, would lose over $352,000 in state funds. If 5% bailed for private school, they'd lose close to $2 million. That's a lot of money for a small district in a small town to lose. Rural Republican lawmakers should take heed here, especially you freshmen. If you want to keep that cushy job, you better listen to your voters back home. Latest on the measles outbreak from KVUE-TV in Austin, where a measles case has popped up. But as with the case last week we told you about in North Texas, it appears to be the result of overseas exposure and unrelated to the Gaines County outbreak. As of Friday, 146 cases, 20 hospitalizations, and 1 death. You might be surprised to learn that even Austin, as liberal as we may appear here, has an insufficient rate of vaccination among our kindergartners at 90%, the standard for solid community protection being 95%. The Dallas Morning News has published a statewide map of other schools where that rate is far lower and the risk for outbreaks far higher. Several of the most at risk are in the DFW area, including Mercy Culture Preparatory Academy in Fort Worth, less than 15% vaccinated. Dallas Christian Academy at 25%. Collin County Christian Academy at 38%. A pattern certainly emerges here, and it's perhaps even more to consider for folks who think their kids might be better off attending a parochial private school. Teddy Rosenbluth at the New York Times says that while U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary and career anti-vax profiteer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did attempt to backtrack on his prior downplaying of the Texas measles outbreak on Friday, he's still not fully recommending vaccines, calling them a personal choice. Rosenbluth also notes other parts of the federal health apparatus with anemic responses so far, including the CDC, which didn't send out any substantive information about the outbreak until just this last Thursday, almost a month after the first cases in Texas were popping up. Perhaps in his own attempt to change the subject, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has found time amidst a major disease outbreak in his state to talk about what we should name our steaks. Ramon Antonio Vargas at The Guardian points out that Patrick's timing in insisting that New York strips, which have been called that since the 1800s, when a Manhattan-based chain established that particular cut and served it with mashed potatoes as their signature dish, should instead be called Texas strips, is not only an attempt to sidetrack our attention with ridiculous bullshit, but it's also a loyalty test for restaurant owners. Watch for Trumpy types to begin publicly chastising their local steakhouses for failing to change their menus to accommodate yet another empty MAGA whim, including those located down near the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Besides this podcast, another that anyone serious about following Texas politics should be subscribed to is Y'all-itics from WFAA in Dallas, and their most recent episode focuses on one of the many areas of the federal government that Elon Musk has taken that chainsaw to lately, but one you might not have noticed. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, has been in Musk's crosshairs for a long time and is now largely in limbo. This is an agency tasked with protecting you and me against unfair, deceptive, or abusive practices by companies, including financial lenders, debt collectors, credit card companies, and more. Entities that just about all of us will eventually end up in conflict with over a bill. Doing away with this agency quite literally leaves consumers like you and me with nowhere to turn for help in these disputes. And Texas in particular is known for a massive amount of interaction with CFPB, either because many of us have learned about the help it offers or because Texas companies love to try and squeeze the little guy, or maybe both. A great argument against your MAGA uncle who's still backing this whole Doge thing, and frankly a disturbing but really important listen. See the link to that podcast episode from Y'all-itics in the show notes. Speaking of Elon Musk, and this reminds me of the standing advice we offer to those of us who have taken to participating in public protests. We celebrate the expression of political resistance, but we advise that it stay safe and lawful. Apparently, some of y'all have taken to vandalizing Teslas. Abigail Rosenthal at the Houston Chronicle sources KUT in Austin for a report that Texas Tesla owners are seeing a huge uptick in expressions of public disgust in their choice of ride. From Teslas being covered in slices of cheese and anti-Nazi stickers being helpfully left under their windshields, to more serious stuff like eggings and spray-painted swastikas, Cybertrucks especially apparently tempting targets, go figure. In an attempt to fend this off, Tesla owners have started sporting bumper stickers saying they bought the car before I knew Elon was crazy, and a growing number are reselling or returning them. Listen, y'all, as entertaining as all this is, it's really important to remember that it's not Texas friendly to mess with your neighbor's stuff. I personally know several really awesome people who happen to drive Teslas. In most cases, the car a person chooses to drive is not a political statement, and as tempting as it might be, we should also leave those Cybertrucks alone too. Our funding at Progress Texas is rarely sufficient for us to plan much more than a quarter or two ahead, but the conservative disinformation machine we oppose has no such obstacle. They're funded by oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups. Our regular everyday listeners form a key component of our funding here at Progress Texas. If that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor, and no amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org/donate. Thanks so much to Shannon Walton, Roxanne Boyd, and Betty Ferguson, all of whom are on the team. We appreciate all of y'all. For our Austin listeners in particular, but really to all of you, the annual Amplify Austin Day nonprofit and charity fundraising event is this week. Look up Progress Texas at amplifyatx.org or see the direct link in the show notes. The official I Live Here, I Give Here Amplify Austin Day starts on the evening of this Wednesday, March 5th, and continues through the evening of this Thursday, March 6th. Your donation helps keep this podcast coming every morning, and also supports our overall mission to fight against disinformation and for progress in Texas, and we thank you in advance. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Monday, March 3rd, 2025. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Progress Texas is a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions. While campaigns come and go, we're the permanent home for progressive media and action in the Lone Star State. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day and a great week. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.